Welcome to our second Facebook Live here in Ending the Cycle of Your Mother Wound, our intro group. And my goal is to do these every Monday, just to kind of wrap up the prior week, maybe talk a little bit more about some of the topics that we discussed, and share with you maybe an exercise or a tool that you can use to help you work through this process. So I do want to say later, thank you for joining this conversation. Thank you for sharing your personal stories. Thank you for sharing your journey here in this space. I know it takes a lot of courage to face your mother wound and to examine the parts of you that can be painful. It takes a lot of courage to do that. And so I just want to say, I think you're brave. I think you're badass. And I also want to say that this is also one of the most liberating things that you can do for yourself. So you rock. You're awesome. Thank you for being here. Oh, okay. So I wanted to talk about a couple of posts that I made last week. And I made a few posts, but there was two in particular that I just wanted to expand upon a little bit because they lead into an exercise that I'm going to share with you before we wrap up here today. And let me just kind of arrange my stuff so I can see, because, I like my notes. So one of the first posts that I posted, what does it says? Hold on, Jack's gonna expense so I can see you. Thank you for starting creating space. Yeah, absolutely. I kind of happened to just stumble into my life's passion. Go figure. It only took me 6 years and a second career, but hey, I'm here. And I love it, and I can't imagine doing anything else. Okay, so last week there were a few posts that I posted, but two in particular, like I said, I want to talk about a little bit more because I'm going to share an exercise at the end of this live for you to do, or just kind of assess where you are with your relationship with your mom. So I posted asking two questions. I can't really go to it. It has something to do with how do you envision the world showing up for you, and how do you show up for the world, and how are those two things influenced by your mother wound? Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate that. It was definitely it was a journey for me. It has been a journey, but I'm very thankful for it because it's brought me here and given me this level of enlightenment and understanding and compassion that I wouldn't have had I not been through everything that I had been through, and wasn't open to healing my own stuff and going through my own, cracking wide open and going, holy shit, I really got some stuff in here that I need to heal and to work on. That's the only reason I can sit in front of you now, and I'm still doing it, right? It's not a complete process. It continues. It's not linear. It's not this thing that you do step 1, step 2, step 3. There are definitely tools that you can, deploy into your life, but they're not. It's not linear, and it's never. I have this theory that our core wounds or our mother wounds or things that we're talking about now really feed into our soul level wounds. And so, what does that really look like? And maybe I'll talk about that at another live. But today we're talking about, before I just go off on a tangent, today we're talking about how you view the world showing up for you versus how you show up for the world, and what that really says through the, and how those things play out for you through the lens of your mother wound. What I've come to understand is that the way that you view the world showing up for you is the way that you hold mom eternally. It's subconsciously the way that you see mom showing up for you. And so how, as you answered that question, as you reflected on that question, where do you see those similarities? Do you view the world showing up for you as unsafe, as unsupportive, as unnurturing? And does that then, flow back into the way that you view the relationship and the way that you view mom showing up for you? Not mine to answer, completely yours to answer, but it's just something to think about. And then on the flip side, how you show up to life is how you have learned to survive, and to ultimately it reflects your resilience. So our subconscious creates all these narratives and all these systems around us to keep us safe based on what our experiences are as children. And so you've learned how to cope, how to survive. You've learned how to exist in a world. But healing and doing this work, it changes that framework for you. Healing allows you to learn how to be more proactive, to learn how to be more engaged and more conscious and more intentional in the way that you show up for the world. So you're not just reacting, right? You're not just kind of going through the motions. You actually can see what's happening in your life a little more clear, and then choose to show up completely differently, or observe and maybe internalize that differently. So there's lots of ways that healing your motherhood can shift this for you. But going back to the original question of how do you see the world showing up for you and reflecting your relationship with mom, when you heal your relationship with mom, this worldview also shifts. And so when you shift the relationship you have with mom, even just internally, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like, but shifting even your internal image of mom to somebody who is more supportive, more secure, is more grounded, you start to feel that the world is the same. And so just wanted to kind of point that out. So maybe go back to that question, look at it. Did your answer reflect that? Does it, if you were to dive into that a little bit more, how does that resonate with you? So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. And if you have any questions and you want to share about that, feel free. This is going to be, resident in our video section, and you can come back to it and I can see the questions, and you can just have a whole conversation here about it if you want. Okay, so one of the leading, so if, I'm going to talk about the orders of love. So Bert Hellinger is the founder of Family Constellation Work. And in his 50 years of research, he came up with this list called the Orders of Love. And there's ultimately about 72 different orders of love. And what I mean by that, it's kind of like the universal laws in which family systems work. And it basically says that when any of these are out of order, the flow of love doesn't happen in the family as it should. Now, being 72, not all 72 apply to every family, but there are 5 that really apply to almost every, there are 5 that apply to every family. And so those are the ones that we talk about the most. Those are the ones that kind of run the narrative of this healing process. And so those are: everyone belongs, no one can be excluded, the order of precedence, that parents hold a higher position of importance, and everyone must own their fate. When I first heard that, and I shared this a little bit on the post, that I really had a hard time with that because I had taken care of myself for my whole life. Coming to and hearing that part of my healing journey was to acknowledge that my parents held a higher precedence and a higher importance than me was really difficult for me to swallow. But I had to step back for a minute because it was more important for me to walk this journey, to heal, and to go through this process than it was for me to hold on to that narrative. And so I stepped back a little bit so I could explore what that meant in my emotions, in my body, and in my actions, and the way that it's played out in my life. So I wanted to share a little bit about what that means. Actually, all 5 of those. So let's go start at the beginning. So everyone belongs to the family system, and no one can be excluded. And what that means is that as a core belief, or as a core need that we have as humans, we have a need to belong. And our first level of belonging is that into our family. And that goes for everyone in the family system, even the ones that are hard to love, even the ones that have victimized people, even the ones that have deeply wounded us, even the ones that have brought pain into the family, even the ones that, who maybe are no longer with us and their passing is really difficult to talk about. So we just kind of shove it under the rug and nobody ever talks about it. Even in those stories, everybody has to belong, because when somebody is left out, it disrupts the order of love. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means. Because And really what it means is that in the family system, patterns repeat until they're resolved. So if somebody is excluded, if somebody is silenced, if somebody is forgotten, if somebody's left out of the family stories and left out of the family soul, there really is a hole in the family soul at that point. And so patterns patterns will repeat within the family system until they are acknowledged. And that is that's a very interesting process, and maybe one day we'll talk about like an identification of what that means. But when it comes to this topic in particular, when we're talking about our mother wound, what it really is saying is that we belong in the family system as the child, our parents belong in the family system as the parent, and we don't get to exclude them, no matter what they've done to us. Yeah, right? I know. It can be really August. August says hello. I don't know what he's barking at. And sometimes that's difficult to sit, right? But I encourage you to sit with that for a minute and invite in what that can possibly mean for you as this process unfolds for you. So patterns in families repeat until they're resolved. And I shared an article about family karma and epigenetics earlier in the week. And if you haven't read it, I recommend that you go do, because that really explains what I'm talking about here, in that patterns will repeat within the family system until they're resolved. And those patterns can show up in many ways through the generations, and they all lead back to a core family trauma. And figuring out that core family trauma gives the family an opportunity to end that pattern. Mother wound healing is figuring out what that core trauma is in regards to the maternal line of your family. And as women, as daughters, most of us carry the emotional weight of our mothers, which is why I focus on it. There are ways, and there is karma that's related to your father and on that line, and that I can do more in personal work, but in this particular work, focusing on mother wound healing, daughters and mothers carry the most emotional weight. Okay, so in all relationships in your life, they all must be equal. They all must be reciprocal. There must be an equal amount of giving and taking in those relationships. Otherwise, they are unequal, right? They feel imbalanced. Somebody feels taken advantage of. And those relationships ultimately find their demise because they're imbalanced, except for the parent-child relationship, because it is the parent's job to give and it is the child's job to receive. At the very core of that statement is that it is the parents who give life and it is the child who receives life. And so going back to the order of precedence and the order of holding a higher position, that's what that's talking about. It's not talking about there's more value or that your parents are valued more, right? It's that from the order of precedence, they give life, you receive life. And every action between parents should mirror that. They give life, you receive that life. That is how love flows within a family. But when there is an imbalance, the orders of love are shifted. Love cannot flow. When a mother wound happens, it leaves an imbalance. And maybe that imbalance looks like we learned that to be loved by our mother, we had to care for her. Or maybe our survival meant that we learned how to care for ourselves. Or maybe we were never nurtured, and so we don't know what that nurturing looks like, right? So if the order of precedence says mom is here, child is here, right? Mom gives to child. And that is the way that love flows. It flows down the family tree. Well, let's see what happens. When you have to care for your mom because she's unable to care for herself, or you've learned to love, that to be loved and accepted and close to your mom, you had to take care of her. Guess what happens? You come up here, right? Because now you've placed yourself above your parents because you're caring for them. You become the big one. Really, what happens is you are the little one. They're always the big one, right? But if you become the big one, they become the little one. Love doesn't flow up. Love flows down the family tree. And so it really is like that simple. Let's just say that you learned how to survive and you had to take care of your own needs while you're probably here, right? Love can't flow sideways like this with a parent. If you never knew what it was to be nurtured, again, here, because you're nurturing yourself, there's no love flowing. Love always flows from parent to child, always. So whatever the circumstances that disordered the love, it also disordered our life force, because love that flows from our parents equals our life force. It becomes imbalanced. And so parents holding a higher position of importance isn't because, like I said, they're more valuable than you. It's just because their job is to give and your job is to receive. It's that simple. Does that make sense? I know, Jessica, you're with me. I hope that makes sense. Let's see. Sometimes if you had a really difficult childhood, right, like I did, your entry into that conversation really is just about acknowledging that, yes, my parents gave me life and I can receive that. If that's the only way that I can acknowledge that I can let in, that I can see right now that my parents love me, was that they gave me life. Okay, I can try to let that in. And that shifts things I know it shifted for me. I can't talk about what it would do for you, but understanding that, or having an awareness that that you are supported by your parents, if only for the reason that they gave you life, shifts something, because you then become the daughter and they become the parent. Even if it's just in that understanding, even if it's just in that way that you get to hold them, is that, yes, my parents gave me life and I can honor them for that. Thank you for giving me life, right? Because honestly, sometimes our childhoods are so painful that that's all we can do. Let's see. I had some notes. I started going off on my own and I forgot my notes. Okay, so just acknowledging that is sometimes the most that we can do, and that's definitely a great entry point. And from there, you can actually allow the healing process to unfold even more, but we need to allow them in somewhere, right? We also honor our parents by leaving their fate with them. Going back to the original way that sometimes we identify with mom because we took care of her or we feel responsible for her, what we're telling her is that we don't trust her to carry her own fate, to carry the weight of her life, to make decisions for herself. We have to step in and try to rescue her, right? And we do that out of loyalty, because children have great loyalty to their parents. And we do that to feel close to them, but we're actually dishonoring them when we don't allow them to carry their fate. And we're also dishonoring them when we don't stand and learn to walk in our own purpose and our own fate, sometimes separating our fate from them. And so honoring our parents means taking back our power, learning what our core is, understanding our life force, and then walking forward in our own life, not merged with them, not living life like them, holding our own life force and our own fate, and allowing them to love us in the way that they are able. So, but this is a learned process. This is a healing process, right? You don't wake up holding, our deep childhood wounds one day and then the next day go, okay, I'm just going to hold you internally differently, and wow, I'm healed. Like, it just doesn't work like that. It's definitely a process. It's an unfolding, and it's layered, and it's being willing to step into that space to crack yourself open just a little bit so that you can start to see what that might look like for you. Because healing means not holding on to the stories of what we didn't get as a child. Because when we don't hold on to those stories, it actually gives the family narrative a chance to heal. And when we give the family narrative a chance to heal, we ultimately heal ourselves. And we heal the system moving forward from us. I know for me, this was powerful to understand. With the childhood I had, I never considered myself as having parents, like I shared earlier. But when I could let go of that story that I kept telling myself about my parents, which honestly was still the little girl in me fighting for what she never got, and when I started to look at my family as a system, I understood why things were the way that they were. And I understood that I could shift the story that I had kept alive, and that shift would allow my parents to sit differently in my heart. And that is what shifted. And that is what really shifted my mother wound, because I was able to feel like a daughter. Because for my entire life, I felt like I was kind of out there on Lone Island, and I was taking care of myself. And I never knew what it was like to feel like a daughter. And that feeling and knowing that I had my mom on one side and my dad on the other, standing behind me as I walk forward in life, was really transformational. And if you have been, a child who didn't have that support, God, I think about it, just makes me a little teary-eyed, but that support gives you so much strength to walk forward. And I know that it might not feel like that as you start this process, but that shift, when it does happen, really is transformational. So this is a very general understanding of this topic. There's so much more that I can go into it. And in my module course that I'm rolling out next year, Ending the Cycle of Your Mother Wound, we're going to dive really deep into these topics. If you have any questions about that, or if you want me to clarify something, I know sometimes I can ramble, but if you want me to clarify anything, just put it in the comments. I would love to continue this conversation. But I wanted to leave you with something that was in Mark Wolynn's book, It Didn't Start With You. If you've not read this book, I highly, highly, highly recommend it, because this, my training came from this book. Not really this book directly, but this is, my mentor was directly trained by Mark Wolynn, and so my practice is heavily influenced by some of the stories and the methods in here. But I wanted to talk about the flow of life and what that really means in our life. So I'm going to read from this book. It's just a couple minutes, couple little passages, and it's going to walk you through just an exercise here. So just get comfortable and listen, and you know, we'll go through this visualization and exercise. So the pathway is simple, and this is really kind of solidifying the flow of love and how life shows up for you, and really what it means to have a life force. So we came here through our parents. As children of our parents, we are connected to something vast that extends backwards in time, literally to the beginning of humanity itself. And through our parents, we're plugged into the very current of life, though we are not the source of that current. The spark has merely been forwarded to us, transmitted biologically, along with our family history. It's also possible to experience how this life lives in us. This spark is our life force. And maybe you can feel it pulsing inside of you right now as you hear this. And if you've ever been with someone when they transitioned, maybe you have felt a life force diminish. You can feel the very instant of separation when the force leaves the body. And likewise, if you've ever witnessed a birth, you can feel the way that a life force will fill a room. That life force doesn't stop with birth. It continues to flow from your parents to you, even if you feel disconnected from them. I've observed both in my clinical practice and in my own life that when our connection to our parents flows freely, parent to child, we experience ourselves as more open to receiving what life brings our way, more open to the way that life shows up for you, that the world shows up for you. And when our connection to our parents is impaired in some way, the life force available to us can feel limited. We may feel blocked and constricted, or feel outside of the flow of life, as if we're swimming upstream against the current. And ultimately we suffer and we don't know why. But we have these resources within us to heal. So let's start by assessing the connection we feel to our parents right now in this very moment, regardless of whether they're still with us or not. So take a minute, get comfortable, and feel the connection or the disconnection that you have with your mom or your parents, whichever you choose. Regardless of the story that you have about them, feel the relationship and how it affects your physical body. So just taking a few breaths. Imagine mom and dad, and just visualize your parents standing in front of you. If you've not met them or you can't visualize them, just let your sense of self sense their presence. And then hold that image. And as you hold that image, ask yourself these questions. Do I welcome them or do I shut them out? Do I sense them as welcoming me? Do I experience one differently than the other? What's happening in my body? Am I relaxed, open, or am I tight and closed? If a life-giving force were flowing from them to me, how much of it would be getting through? 5%, 25%, 50%, 75%, or a full 100%? Now, the life force that flows from our parents flows freely to us. There's nothing that we need to do. Our only job is to receive it. That's our parents giving to us as children. So visualize this life force as the main wire that feeds electricity into your home. All the other wires that branch off into the various rooms depend on the main wire for power. And no matter how successfully we wire our house, if our connection to the main wire were compromised, the flow would be impacted. And so how is that flow? How are you experiencing the life force from your parents? That's for you to figure out. If you want to share, if you want to comment, you're more than welcome. But maybe that's a journaling exercise for you. And I can put those questions in the comments if you want, so you can revisit this later. But that's a way for you to start to examine the way that you allow life force coming in from your parents or from your mom, since we're talking about motherhood healing. So that's it. That's my Facebook Live for this week. And I am so thankful that you shared time with me today. Thank you so much. And I encourage you to step into your healing with courage, because you are so capable of walking through this time in your life and able to heal anything that you want to. Have a great week. Bye-bye.